Is Rogue One good? It has been a long and very enjoyable journey as we have took a way too in-depth look at the Skywalker saga. But now that's over, and we're looking at a different Star Wars story today, the one where the rebellion uncovers the plans to the Death Star. This movie came out a few days shy of a year after the release of Force Awakens, and I was still riding the high of that movie pretty well, but I was more excited for this one than The Force Awakens. I went into this movie knowing two things: that at the end they would have the plans for the Death Star, and there were some pretty awesome Darth Vader scenes that were inside of it. And that last fact alone was enough to make me want to go see it. And I did. And enough reminiscing about my pre-movie hype. Let's just get to that opening crawl. Whoa! The Mad Lads did it. They did no opening crawl for this movie. Already one of the best Star Wars movie. And that continues in the next scene, which is possibly the best acted in all of Star Wars that my eyes have had the pleasure to view up to this point in all of these reviews. The scene is filled with tension, which, as I have said many times, is my favorite kind of scenes with dialogue in them. And it ends with a shootout, which is really cool to see. The Death Troopers are cool, and the little girl escapes and is helped by our good and radical rebel friend Saw Gerrera, which is really cool to see in live action as opposed to just as a cartoon in Rebels or the Clone Wars. A long flash forward cuts to what we can assume is an older Jin, and then we quickly cut to another protagonist, of some kind at least, as he quickly shoots his informant in the back after giving him the information about a defecting Imperial pilot and a Imperial superweapon. He shoots him in the back to keep him from being captured and interrogated, and it's cool to see this darker side of the rebellion, as the original trilogy made the rebellion all sunshines and rainbows, which is fine. I just like to see this darker side of things, and the note that all sides of wars have their good guys and bad guys. Then we cut to that Imperial pilot that was being talked about going to Saw Gerrera. Then back to Jin on the transport. The transport gets attacked, and she gets rescued by what I think is the best character in the movie, a droid, K2SO. I know, very different than my typical droid hatred that I have, but he's a lot of fun. After a really strong opening scene to the movie, we've been doing a lot of jumping around to introduce characters, which isn't unbearable, but it has made the pacing really hard to enjoy after that really strong opening. With Jin saved, we have a minute with her and the rebel spy Cassian Andor back at the base with Mon Mothma, which is a cool callback to the original trilogy, just to see her on screen again, where they discuss the Imperial pilot falling into the hands of Saw Gerrera. He has radicalized completely and broken off from the rebellion, and they need to get the pilot from him. And to do that, they're going to use the previous connection Jin had with Saw to kind of soften him up. So they go in, talk to Saw, get the pilot, go save Jin's dad, Galen, and everyone lives long and happy lives. Except not so much, because they immediately give Cassian the orders to kill Galen instead of rescue him. He accepts these orders without questioning them, furthering this anti-hero vibe he was throwing off. And then as they depart, K2SO proves why he is the best character in this movie with some witty banter.
Where'd you get it?
I found it.
I find that answer vague and unconvincing.
The pilot contends with an absolutely insane Saw Gerrera, who looks much worse for wear, looking more machine than man, if you will. And the brief scene ends with one of my favorite lines from the movie.
Poor Gullet.
We then get to see Grand Moff Tarkin brought back to life with the average CGI that has mustered him back. But it's cool to see him back regardless, and I'm reminded why I liked his character so much in A New Hope, and how much of a waste it was to kill him off in that movie. As usual, we cannot escape spending a good deal of screen time on a desert planet, so off to Jedha we go. The Star Destroyer hovering above the city is really cool, though, and K2 is the best character, if I haven't mentioned that already.
I'm just worried they might miss you and hit me.
Doesn't sound so bad to me.
This thing is terrifying and disgusting, and I'm not sure how it transfers whatever knowledge it finds out to Saw, or if that's even how it works, and Saw is just trying to torture him because he's a maniac at this point. But Jin and Cassian make their way into the city, where they meet another one of our characters, Chirrut Amwi, something like that. He's a blind force monk. The blind monk trope is a bit on the nose for me, but it's a trope for a reason, I guess. And it's pretty cool when you factor in like the force sensitivity part of it. So we'll let it slide. While Jin was talking with Chirrut, Cassian finds out that Saw plans to launch an attack on the city, and they need to get the heck out of Dodge. But it's too late, as they are trying to escape. The ambush happens on an Imperial convoy, and the chaos that ensues is fantastic. Really, anybody who came to see this movie and sees this scene has got what they paid for, because it's a great scene, and we figure out that Jin is our real hero as she goes out of her way to save a little girl who would almost certainly be killed. But then she hides behind a tank, and one of Saw's rebels is about to blow that tank up, and Cassian saves Jin by shooting that rebel, furthering Cassian's anti-hero little character arc. He's not afraid to get his hands dirty. But we aren't done yet, because Chirrut comes in to save the day with some Jedi reflexes and a staff and takes down a bunch of troopers. And it's, again, really awesome. He says afterward that he's not a Jedi, which is kind of a shame, but at the same time, if he used a lightsaber, they would really just steal the show, and I think they did a good job with what they've got. Their freedom does not last long, however, as they are quickly surrounded by Saw's remaining troops and are taken to his hideout. There are several lines in this movie that contend for best line of the movie, and I think this one takes the cake.
There is more than one sort of prison, Captain. I sense that you carry yours wherever you go.
But the fact that there is a competition for it is just a big step up in what we are used to from our normal Star Wars writing. So that's just good to see. But I think that this line from Chirrut in the prison cells is my favorite. Jin gets her audience with Saw, where we learn that he abandoned her when she was maybe a teenager, since people were starting to figure out that she was actually Galen Erso's daughter. She's really over the idea of fighting the Empire at this point, but I think the message from her dad, and also seeing the just raw destruction of the Death Star, probably changes her mind. Director Krennic, in a bid to impress Grand Moff Tarkin with little success, test fires the weapon on the city of Jeddah, and it is an awesome thing to behold. Luck would have it that the entire crew is able to bust out with the pilot and make their escape. Saw decides that he's going to stay behind because, as previously mentioned, he is a completely insane person. The flight through the crumbling planet's crust is a visually spectacular sight, and it ends with another really cool visual as we see some of the mantle of the planet being ejected into the stratosphere of the planet. It's just really cool, really well done, and I have to agree with director Krennic.
Oh, it's beautiful.
Tarkin takes credit for this success, obviously, but what are you going to do? That's corporate/government work for you, I guess. Jin relays the message that she got from her father to the crew, but she forgot to actually grab the holodisk in the dumbstruck chaos that she was experiencing, and no one believes her. Okay, Chirrut does, but no one really cares. She manages to convince the crew that they need to save Galen so that he can tell the rebellion leaders this himself, and that doesn't really matter because Cassian is going to murder him as soon as they make contact. Everyone knows something is up with Cassian, but not quite for sure. But Chirrut does, as he says the Force moves darkly around him and people that are about to kill. He might not be a Jedi, but I think he's the closest thing you can get to it without actually being one. With the cruise ship crashing and losing communications with the rebellion is not taking any chances and calls in an airstrike to kill Galen. And Jin tries her best to save her dad, but is just a bit too late. She does manage to have one last moment with him before he passes, and it's just a great scene overall. We see Cassian has a chance to take the shot on Galen, but doesn't, so more anti-hero confirmed there. There's a great spot where Sharut blind snipes a TIE fighter out of the air with his staff bow weapon thing, and that's really sweet. Just a lot of really cool Star Wars stuff happening in this scene. And at the end, K2 and the pilot manage to steal an Imperial shuttle, and the whole crew manages to escape without any harm. The whole scene is great because there's just so much tension in it, and while you can pretty much assume that some of these characters are not going to make it out of this movie, you don't know when or where that's going to happen, and they're pretty well written characters, and that is furthered in the next scene between Jin and Cassian, where she confronts him about trying to kill Galen, and Cassian admits that he does some of these evil things that he doesn't feel great about, but he has lived this rebel life his whole life, and while he's not proud of some of the things he has done, they're for the greater good, and it's just really cool to see that gray area of the rebellion, and I'm here for it. I'm really hoping that the Cassian Andor show that they're coming out with later will be somewhere in this vibe as well. Switching back to director Krennic, he is in the unenviable position of explaining what the frick just happened to the Dark Lord Vader himself. His acting in the presence of Darth Vader is pretty great, and the scene also has runner-up line of the movie for me here.
Be careful not to choke on your aspirations, director.
I still cannot fathom why we do not have a movie or series about just Darth Vader at this point, though. The patented Star Wars battle plan scene comes next, and Jin tries to explain the situation to the rebellion, but they aren't buying it. They don't want to risk a full assault on an Imperial station. However, Cassian and his spies, saboteurs, and assassins join her anyway. They all board the shuttle that they stole and make their way to Scarif. A fun little scene to bridge this movie with the prequels and the original trilogy here is with Bail Organa. It's always good to see just the attention to the details here, and it shows you that the people that made this movie cared about Star Wars, whether it was prequel, original, sequel, or even some bits of Rebels and the Clone Wars are spread throughout this movie, and the detail and care that went into it, I very much appreciate. Scarif is how Star Wars planets should look. Bright, vibrant, alien, with these many islands and archipelagos of thin strips of land. Not something that you typically see here on Earth, or even, just as long as it's not a desert. Anything but a desert. Felucia, to me, is the best Star Wars planet, and this is a close second, I think. The small rebel crew land and sneak in a very Star Wars classic fashion by luring some stormtroopers aboard the ship and knocking them out and taking their outfits. So that's a fun little nod there as well. The rest of the crew will make a distraction by blowing some stuff up outside the base, so Jin and Cassian, along with K2, can sneak inside and do what they need to do. Director Krennic has made his way to Scarif as well to investigate this information leak, conveniently at the exact same time as these bombs go off. This makes Grand Moff Tarkin call in the big guns, but the rebellion does the same thing, and some of the rebellion has decided to make their move to assist this small band in their efforts. We get more awesome ground battles with a World War II-like feel to them, and I remember saying that same thing about the Hoth battle in Empire Strikes Back, and I'm sure the massive AT-ATs from a ground view help with that. The battle then moves to space as we see some ships start to engage and some X-Wings try to make it through that blocking portal. And several of them do, a few of them don't. And I just always forget how good this movie looks and sounds. With the facility placed in lockdown, the only option left for Jyn and Cassian is to manually find the hard drive files and wirelessly transmit them to a ship. But they need to disable the shields in order to make that transmission. Admittedly, not a lot of this makes sense, but it's Star Wars, and that's pretty par for the course. And this movie's been pretty good about logic up to this point, and it's not my movie to make the rules in, so I'm okay with it. Really, it just gives us more of an excuse for awesome ground and space battles, and I am here for it. I feel like this whole movie has really just been an excuse for cool ground and space battles, and I am totally okay with that. The fact that the rest of the movie has been pretty great is just icing on top of that cake. As Jyn and Cassian move in on the files, things start to take a turn for the worse for the battle outside, specifically for our buddy K2, but Bodhi, Sharut, and Baze don't make it much further. They make their sacrifices worth it as K2 manages to seal the vault doors and the rest of the crew establish the uplink, but they don't make it much further, going out in a blaze of glory. Small note here that the Death Troopers are really cool, and I wish they existed more outside of this movie. The space battle is still raging and going quite well, though. The use of a hammerhead to crash into a disabled Star Destroyer to take out a second Star Destroyer, and then the shield, though, would be my favorite scene in the movie if there wasn't still one coming up. Just the creativity and CGI here in this scene is fantastic, and I'm here for it. Jyn and Cassian start to climb the communications tower to start the manual upload, but Cassian gets shot and falls off the tower below. Jyn keeps going and manages to start the upload, but is interrupted by Director Krennic, who, instead of shooting her immediately, stops and chats for a bit before Cassian, who somehow did manage to make the climb after all, shoots him and saves the day. Afterward, Jyn really wants to go pummel his lifeless corpse, which I thought was a small but significant detail, but Cassian actually stops her. They get to see the Death Star in action one last time, which is, again, really freaking sweet. And they embrace each other as friends and comrades with a hug as the blast envelops them, not with a forced kiss that feels like someone got assaulted because there was no romantic chemistry between them through the whole movie. It's an important note. But the movie isn't over yet. We've saved the best for last. As the files are transmitted to the rebels in a ship above, Darth Vader gives chase. And it is absolutely brutal as he pursues them down a narrow hallway, and it's really the brutal details that make the scene as he force slams a guy into the ceiling and then cuts him in half with the lightsaber as he passes, and then deflects a blaster bolt at the one running away. It's just so good, and again, the attention to detail is what makes it, and I'm just so flabbergasted we don't have a Darth Vader movie. Please give us a Darth Vader movie, Disney. Please. As they barely manage to escape with the files, they deliver them to a not so great CGI recreation of Princess Leia, and she speaks of hope and roll credits. This movie is just fantastic. I've heard it said that this is a great movie but a bad Star Wars movie, and I tend to agree with that sentiment. But I wish that this was the standard for Star Wars movies and not the exception to the rule. The fact that you can take this plot and the dialogue and everything about it and move it to a different World War II setting or modern day setting and it be just as good is really a statement to how well written this movie and its characters are. But I think what really makes it great for me is the amount of screen time dedicated to Star Warring. In the other movies, there's a battle here or there, but this is darn near half the movie is ground battles or space battles, and that is awesome. And on that note, we have one last movie to wrap up the entire series in Solo, a Star Wars story, and I've only seen that movie one time, so I'm looking forward to getting into reviewing that with pretty fresh eyes. And if you liked this review of what I thought was the best Star Wars movie that exists, go ahead and hit the like button, and dislike if you didn't, and tell me in the comments if you would like to see a Vader Star Wars story movie as much as I do. That's going to do it for this one. Thanks for watching, everybody, and until next time, I'll catch you later.